Live.
We're live and in the flesh. This is how nerve-wracking to be live.
It's so exciting. It's so exciting with Freedom Center to do this. First Substack Live, but as we were just saying, as we were getting ready, trying to make sure that everything works out technically is always the big question at the beginning.
So are you an experienced Substack Live person? I mean, I do things the safe way, but maybe you're more adventurous.
I have done a few, and I'll tell you that they are always interesting because I did them early in Substack's live career, I guess, when they were just trying to figure out, the live technology. And so sometimes you were using your phone, and it was like, trying to figure out, is my video showing, and it was a little bit more difficult than, live television production when everybody has everything together. But that was kind of the fun of it.
Well, I'm a rookie when it comes to this live stuff, so I'm glad you're experienced. I do things a nice and safe way. I edit a little, I make sure it's just right, and then I send it out. But this will be warts and all. Well, Johanna,
with some major issues.
You were frozen on my screen. I hate to tell you, Johanna.
Oh, no.
You were frozen, but now you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if there were any issues. Hopefully no more. But we'll see.
Oh, let's just call it a glitch, never to return.
A glitch.
Well, Johanna, I think the public would like to know about you and where you're from and what you've been doing and so on and so forth. And also whether you say Maska.
And likewise. So first, when I was just doing advance and in the background of politics, Johanna Maska is how I pronounce my name. But I didn't care if people said Johanna, Joanna, whatever, because, you give people, it's not always easy to remember your name. And then your parents start watching you. And so when someone else is saying your name wrong, they're like, how hard is Maska? Or how hard is Johanna? And then you realize, okay, I have to actually get it right. My name is pronounced Johanna Maska. I'm originally from Galesburg, Illinois. Galesburg is a small manufacturing town in the middle of the country. My family still lives there. I grew up from 5th grade on. I was born in Wichita, Kansas. So my family hails from Kansas originally. But that shaped my view of politics. Galesburg is the place President Obama talked about in his 2004 convention speech, now a very long time ago, when he talked about manufacturing closing and cities like Galesburg, Illinois, that had Maytag closing and the effects of that on our economy and on our generation. I mean, my generation was the one that had graduated right before Maytag closed, and so it was our generation that was competing with our parents' generation in many cases for jobs that were not the same. So I was really drawn to politics, and really drawn to work with President Obama. I had worked after college. I went to the University of Kansas. I worked with Kathleen Sebelius in Kansas, and then moved up to Iowa, worked on a gubernatorial there, and then ended up working with President Obama for 8 years. I was his director of press advance, so traveled with him to 42 countries. A little girl from Galesburg, Illinois, getting to see the world in a totally different way. It was extraordinary. I come from a relatively conservative family, so it's been interesting, since I left the world of politics, and I wrote this past week about when you get jaded. And Jay, I'm sure you have stories of getting jaded, especially when it comes to politics and some of these big issues. But I got jaded and really thought, there needs to be accountability. I was always lucky that I admired President Obama, but but not everyone in politics is there for the same reason, and you realize that. Some people are there for themselves, and, I got very frustrated when I left originally. I actually moved out to Los Angeles to work for the Los Angeles Times when Austin Butner and Eli Broad wanted to turn it into a nonprofit. I wish they had been successful. They were not, and so I was here just a few months before, unfortunately, that fell through, and I've been looking for free and fair media since that moment, Jay. And so I'm so thrilled that we are doing this and doing this together with the Freedom Center. And so now I have to turn the question right back at you, Jay. Please, tell us who you are.
Huh.
Obviously,
Still trying to figure that
people
out? Huh.
people probably know you. You've
Mm,
you've been a byline for a very long time.
mm.
But who you are, where you hail from, and why you're here today.
Well, I so prize my affiliation with the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom. That's the formal name of the Freedom Center at the University of Arizona. It's really quite an honor. What could be better than freedom and its pursuit? Freedom with justice, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a Michigander. I grew up in Ann Arbor, and I was always drawn to politics, history, world affairs. I loved reading the newspaper with my grandfather and talking over the events of the day or of the week, and that was practically heaven to me. And I think I became a political junkie at some point. I hope I'm relatively cured. Too much junkiedom when it comes to politics is not too great. But politics is important, and good government is important. I'm a conservative. I'm a Reagan conservative or a Buckley conservative, if you like. I'm also, you might say, a classical liberal. I cherish the American founding, its principles and ideals. These are Enlightenment principles and ideals. I have a lot of views, policy views, and so forth, very strong views. But above all that is a desire to see our system perpetuated. Above
Mm.
all that is the desire to hang on to this constitutional republic of ours. I'm really a single issue man at this point, democracy or no. And I say yes. We need to keep the car on the road, so to speak.
Well, I remember when we were first talking about launching the Substack and everything together, and you were talking about democracy. And I do think, we're at this point in our country's history that's so fascinating because there's a lot of doubt in institutions.
Fascinating, like a multi-car wreck.
I mean, how lucky we are to be alive during
Yeah.
this. But there's real questions about, our representative democracy and whether it represents us, as a people, whether, there's a lot of money in politics. The my hometown, they don't have manufacturing back. A lot of people, they voted for President Obama, they voted for President Trump. They wanted to see, more jobs come back to the area, and that has been slow. And so there's a real frustration in our democracy, and there are a lot of people, I think, actually, who have good that are designed to be preserved for longevity. I have seen how difficult it is. I don't know if you remember, but I even have it all over my little studio here. Change we can believe in, change we need. Those were all our slogans with President Obama. And then we got into the White House and saw how difficult it was to bring about real change for Americans, and some of those structural hurdles that you're seeing, President Trump now completely change in how he tries to effectuate change. There's some on the left who think, well, that's what we need to do, but for the policy prescriptions that we have. And so it is an interesting time. And I know that but I have a 14-year-old and I am expecting again. So I care a lot about the future of the country, for this next generation. children as well, and whether they'll enjoy the same freedoms that I got to grow up with and the opportunities that I got to grow up with.
Yes, I've been thinking too a lot about these fundamental questions, and the things I once took for granted, I really don't take for granted anymore. Limited government, individual rights, a free economy, separation of powers. And my first president, so to speak, was Jimmy Carter. He was the first one I was really aware of. I remember hearing about Watergate. I thought it had something to do with water. Um, but I do remember the 1976 presidential campaign very well. And how old was I? My math is a little slow. I was 12 during that campaign. So I followed the Carter presidency in my way. And he had a slogan: a government as good as its people, a government as good as our people. And in a democracy, do we always have that? In that these are democratic choices. So the people elect all of our elected officials, president, vice president, all those House members, 100 senators, governors, so on and so forth. So I often think about this. An old colleague of mine would say about education, if people really wanted better schools, we would have them. Do we have the politics we deserve? Do we have the politics we vote for? I mean, I think about Donald Trump, for example, and not my kind of guy, but the Republican Party has nominated him for president 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Never before has the GOP nominated anyone for president 3 times in a row.
That is very interesting, actually.
That's really why he's the very first. Only Trump has that honor, that distinction. So the people have spoken, and the people in general have elected Trump twice. So what do you think about this, Johanna? At any given time, do we have the politics and the government we, pardon the expression, deserve?
I don't think we do. And I would say, one of the reasons I was drawn to news media and, the information we consume is because I think that a democracy requires a well-informed constituency. And I think right now it's really hard for people to get information on their candidates. I mean, right now I'm living in California during this gubernatorial election. Of course,
What a
Gavin
circus,
Newsom.
Johanna.
It is a real circus. Gavin Newsom has been our governor for some time, and talking about education, a lot of us who are public school parents have been very frustrated with the state of public education. And I will say, our schools were closed for a very long time. That had a significant effect on our students who were at home and had very different circumstances in which they were learning. Then we went back. There were all sorts of funds that were put into plexiglass and not into great teachers and keeping great teachers in the classroom. And we've seen budget cuts. So there's a lot of frustration. And you say, okay, so we should all be going to the town halls of all of these people running for office.
Who has the time? Yeah.
I am a well-informed, I consider myself now well-informed and, pretty able to
You are not the average bear, Johanna Maska, I can tell you that. You are an unaverage bear.
Having set up all these town halls around the world for the president of the United States, I would think I could figure out how to get to a town hall for a gubernatorial candidate here in California. And I see that Javier Becerra is coming to Los Angeles. He's surging a little bit. And I try to get tickets for people to go. And they have this Eventbrite that you have to put in for the wait list, and then one person will get off the wait list. And so we don't have those town halls. There's a lot of people who are concerned about security, rightfully so. So they're pulling back on some of these. They're vetting people who are coming to their events and their engagements. We are not having those kinds of in person, I want to ask my candidate, something about the state of education, or any candidate about the state of education. It's inaccessible. At the same time, where we have all these influencers, who have very different journalistic standards. Some of them are excellent investigative journalists. Obviously, the the whole of the Eric Swalwell debacle here in California, unveiling some really serious allegations against him, came out through influencers who used their platforms to bring about attention to issues that had been whispered for some time and hadn't been covered. So, you see this changing media at a time where, you have real questions. And so to me, Jay, it's like we need to have some structural improvements. And I thought that even when President Biden was going back in the White House, I was very frustrated because, of course, there'd been an assault on the media, traditional media, and, the briefing room. And there's a desire of a lot of politicians to control who gets to cover them. And we've seen it just on steroids this time around with President Trump, and certainly with the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War now, throwing out whoever he wants in the briefing room. But that means that only certain people get information. And if only certain people can get information, deserve, because we don't have the structural uh position for people to get the information that they need. If I can't get the information, how is, my son's friend who really cares about issues supposed to get into a town hall of a gubernatorial candidate here in California? And that's really troubling to me.
Well, I might say a word about the media, and you tell me what you think of this. When I was growing up, long past my growing up, we had 3 broadcast networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, and PBS. And we had some dominant newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. We had Time Magazine, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report. And people on the right thought that our media were dominated by the left or the center left, and conservatives didn't get a fair shake. And we wanted a great proliferation of media, a great democratization of media. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. We need more. This is too small a pond, these media bigwigs.
Yeah.
And so we got that. We got this proliferation of media, this democratization. I'm not sure it's a better world. It might fall under the category of be careful what you wish for. With everyone, as the expression goes, I think, siloed off. Everyone curating, as they say, his own media. People say, well, where are you getting that? We're living on different planets. We're not hearing the same things. And if there's not a basic general agreement on facts, discussion, the airing of opinions can hardly begin. People ask me, I used to ask people have asked me, what is your media diet? I'd say, well, this newspaper, that newspaper, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure I know what my media diet is today. I go on social media. I see articles that people link to and highlight. I do sort of cling to my Associated Press feed. I read my favorite opinion columnists. But maybe I should, toughen up a little and have a better diet. I think it's hard for people to know today what a media diet ought to be. Yeah.
Well, can I tell you that I go to Breitbart as much as I go to, Daily Beast. My husband was like, "Why'd you subscribe to the Daily Beast?" I'm like, I just, I want to know what they're saying.
You're ecumenical. Good for you.
I go to Drudge, and, Drudge, of course, used to be very conservative. And I remember in the White House, I was working for President Obama. There was a press release that went out that had a typo in it. And of course, at that time, he hated President Obama. He would make us look like idiots every time he could. But there was a press release that had gone out, and my name was the only contact on the press release. And I got the most heinous emails from Drudge readers at the time. And so
I'm
it's
so sorry.
ironic now
Yeah.
that sometimes I go on Drudge, but it's so interesting to me what he finds like all over the place. You can go on all sorts of different sites. And then what I find so interesting is the algorithms on social media, because my son is fed such a different diet. And that's, I think, having a 14-year-old in my house who I have given access to social media because I know he'll get it. I, you know, I Tom Steyer recently said we need to shut down social media for all kids before they're 16. I was, a kid raised at a time where they said they were going to shut off drugs and alcohol to everyone before they were 21. And growing up in Galesburg, Illinois, everybody had access to drugs and alcohol. So, it's kind of one of those things where I'm going, well, yeah, we could tell everybody no access to social media, but then they'll take their parents' social media or whatever. And so I've told my son, if you are have a phone, just know that the Russians have your data, so I will too. So
Ah,
so I'm going to look at everything that you look at. But sometimes I'll be like, where did you get that information? But then it's funny because I have a friend who's not in politics. She was in entertainment for years. And sometimes they'll both send me the same reels. Some of them are like very conspiratorial. And I'm going, whoa, like, it's so interesting that you're getting fed
jeez.
this. But, there are real questions. Jay, I don't know that the world where three men controlled all of the diet for all of America was better. I will say I think progress is slow and there are problems and hiccups in progress. I think that it is, in this moment, though, very confusing for people to know who they can rely on, which is
I
why I think the Arizona Freedom Center and what we're doing is good, because it gives you voices you can trust.
I certainly hear what you're saying. I have a reservation about the new media, or many reservations, and one is conspiracy theories have always been with us. Never in human history, I'm sure. Has there been a time without conspiracy theories? They're part of life, but they were on the fringe. They were on the fringes, left and right. It seems to me the conspiracy theories, and we would laugh at them. The supermarket tabloids and so on. Elvis and the Lindbergh baby are hiding out in Montana. But it seems to me the conspiracy theories now are front and center,
Well,
and more mainstream than they've ever been.
and because you don't necessarily have the reliable news organizations, for example, I actually
Well,
appreciated
we all
that.
cursed the gatekeepers. We cursed the gatekeepers, but I think some kind of miss them now that they're gone.
Well, so there's the 10 nuclear scientists and people who are related to nuclear weapons who have gone missing or have come up dead. I actually appreciated that Fox News asked about it in the briefing the other day, because this has become a big story on social media. And it is weird, like we just had a lieutenant governor in Virginia who,
Mm.
in a domestic dispute, killed his wife in under, this is someone who used to be a front runner as a Democrat. About Eric Swalwell have more truth to them. And so, to some extent, I'm going, well, there's a reason why these questions are now being asked. If you're a position of power, if you're in that position of power, if you're the White House press secretary, I think you have a duty to respond to everyone. And my problem isn't that they're letting new media in. I think that's great. Media is changing. It's that they are very selective in who they let in. And they let in journalists who are essentially posing as administration puppets, who are saying, I remember it was during COVID. It was like, why did President Obama and Nancy Pelosi go cook, the COVID virus together in the Wuhan lab? And like, this is coming from someone who's supposedly a journalist. And it's like, I don't think that happened. But,
Yeah,
this,
it's the
it's
old question
troubling.
of What do you trust?
Yeah.
What news sources are authoritative? I guess it's buyer beware. You have to go by feel, kick the tires, test out different organizations. I like the old fashioned wire services, just the rat a tat, just the facts, ma'am, news services, news reports. Of course, I make mistakes. Nothing is perfect. But I know several people who are searching for trustworthy sources, and I'm afraid I don't think there's one-stop shopping. I
No,
think you have to have a little sort of a menu or a bouquet of media outlets,
you have to.
right, left, center. Yeah.
You have to. And, it is interesting because, you have people calling out news outlets who are, for example, the New York Times accidentally put the wrong name for NATO.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so you
And,
see kind of
and,
real time
any
correction.
journalist can sympathize with that and
Yeah,
empathize, So
because
we're worried
it
that
was
we'll
the
misspell
editor.
our own name, get our birthday
Ah,
wrong. Yeah.
it is so, one of the things, Jay, I wanted to
I'll
talk.
tell you a little story.
Yeah.
I think the editor of Commentary Magazine, Neil Kazadoy, this is legend, but I think it's true. Joseph Epstein wrote an essay in which he mentioned his height, and the editor revised it downward.
Oh
that,
my
that
gosh.
didn't trust the height the author had given. So in the old school, you checked everything.
I guess the question is if you're gonna, like, pull up your, tape measure to
Yeah,
to the source, and then oh dear.
no,
I
that's
mean,
meticulous. Yeah.
I don't know about that one. But I was just thinking about, the troubling situation, like, during COVID and during real national security issues, like, the war with Iran. I think that's when it's like, wait, who am I going to trust? And people are trying to figure out, okay, this is serious. I want real information. And, how am I going to turn to it? And it was interesting because I think if COVID was the test case for us, we didn't do so well. And now we're going into the conflict with Iran, which, we don't know what's going to happen. It has a lot of players that, there have been a lot of worries about. To me, I don't know about you, Jay, but I'm very against this conflict. I do not believe that President Trump should have gone into it without a clear objective, and I think the objective keeps changing. And I think that we're in, a precarious situation because, unfortunately, though I want the U.S. to remain the moral and economic leader worldwide, I think China actually under President Trump has gained more than we have. Certainly, with the tariffs, you see a lot of people buying from China in terms of the global market, which is a detriment for us. So, I'm seeing what he's doing, and I'm seeing, these kinds of dominoes, and you're going, okay, we need really reliable facts if we're going into a world in which we have a ground invasion or, a conflict that results in a cyber uh, you know, uh, attack on America or something on our power grid or something that could be, significant. And I think we haven't passed the test yet. So
We are, I'll say something elementary. I'll say something kindergarten, something ABC. Aren't we lucky to have a free press?
yes,
In some societies, they have to take the word of the government, or all they have is the word of the government and state media. We're so lucky to have a free press, as messy as it is, And so I say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and you'll have some good flowers and some weeds in
yeah.
these media outlets. But man, it's better than state dominance. So much better.
Well, and didn't Pete Hegseth today, I think, said, like, you're not you can't question the war and be a good journalist. I remember when I was a student at the
I,
University of Kansas, it
I'm
was
not sure.
trust but
I'm not sure an
verify.
American would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, trust but verify. You were supposed to
Yeah.
be a skeptic if you're a journalist.
Gorbachev hated it when Reagan would bring that. Reagan was constantly quoting it in Russian, something like "Doverai no provera." I can't remember what he said, but Reagan just loved it. Gorbachev would roll his eyes. Trust but verify. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
right.
that was what we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's a changing world.
I might say
Obviously.
distrust and verify.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
Mm,
you're right. But
mm,
I do think that there has been, and maybe it's, in both parties, although I certainly saw the press were contentious with us, with President Obama.
mm.
But I would say, there have been some journalists who have been more um, apt to believe one side, and that is a detriment. And I think that, to the extent that journalists are now taking their opinions and really running with it
Mhm.
is a detriment to the free press. So I agree with you. The wire service, they have very, very tough standards still. So the Associated Press, Reuters. But do you remember in the immediate aftermath of the strike in Iran, the Reuters was reporting that the Ayatollah had gotten out, and of course, it was wrong because they had to do more reporting. And so all of these evolving stories, you can say, okay, trust this. And then somebody will say, well, they reported this, which is
Well,
true.
people do their best, and I think it's wise to say things like, "As far as we know,
Yes.
as of this moment, so we hear, stay tuned." And
Yeah.
it's an old colleague of mine pointed out something interesting, that the word day is embedded in the word journalism, jour, French for day. So in a sense, daily journalism is a redundancy. You
Hmm.
do the best you can that day. Now it's hourly or minute by minute. What do we know this minute? By the way,
It's
Johanna, I am
changing.
so old. I remember when CNN came in, it was news all day, and then they had headline news every half hour.
Yes.
There's a half hour all day long. And to freaks like me, it was just heaven. Because it used to be you had to wait till 6:30 or 7 to
To
get a
get the
newscast, a
news.
national newscast. And then you
To
got a
get
local newscast at 11 after the primetime shows were over. But to watch a newscast anytime during the day, young people have to trust me. It was so novel. It was so novel.
there is a certain amount of people looking back with these rose colored glasses and saying, "Oh, things were so great." And my son
Mm,
recently said, because especially here in California, we're seeing the changes very quickly in the Hollywood industry, and he's always been a creator, and he hates artificial intelligence. I didn't need Axios to tell me that he hates artificial intelligence and is very reluctant about what changes are coming about with artificial intelligence. But he said something like, I think I was born in the wrong era. And I think that, um, I guess, lets go of our power to
mm,
shape our era.
mm.
And so I hope with what we're doing with the Freedom Center and with new media, we can get to a point where we actually regain some of that power. I do believe artificial intelligence needs massive regulation, and
Yeah.
we're not having those conversations too often.
Johanna, I have a couple of questions for you. One is your son, 14.
Hmm.
Does he go to a movie theater ever? I mean,
All the time,
so
all the time.
to a theater with a
Yes.
big screen and a
Yep.
darkened room and maybe a
Yep.
popcorn, that still
But we live in
happens?
Los Angeles, and you can buy a
Oh,
pass, so you can go as many
okay,
times as you want, and he will go to the same movie even multiple times, but he loves it. He is a movie guy. So,
great.
you know,
So he's not necessarily looking at his phone, watching a movie on his phone. He's
although he
great.
will do that, he'll
Sure.
read also, he reads his manga. That's the other interesting thing that we were talking about intellectual property the other day. The Iranians are making all of these Lego videos, and it's like the internet.
Johanna, you forget you're talking to a dinosaur. I don't know what a manga. What
A
did you
manga.
say? Manga? You have to go slow with me. It's like you're talking to your great grandmother when you
No,
talk to
no,
me.
no, no,
What
no. No, no, no. Uh,
sounds like something
it's
to eat?
it's the, like, anime type of book that's, it's
Oh, of
a
course. Okay,
but he
I'll get
he
with it.
reads them
Maybe.
on his phone because you
Okay.
can get them in color on your phone and not always in the, library. So, it is, but what I will say is we were having this conversation because now a lot of people are consuming international media. they're consuming things from around the world, and we are on social media. So the Iranians are putting out this, the Lego videos that they're, of course, playing the propaganda game against the Trump administration, and probably pretty effectively. But where is, the ability of Lego to sue Iran
Yeah.
for intellectual property breach? Like,
Yeah.
we don't have international laws for this, this world we're living in. We can't even make laws here in America right now. So, we should probably do a better job of that. And then I think we do need to talk about, what are those kinds of international, norms. But you've got a president right now who's trying to pull us out of every alliance and, the international order, which is probably to our detriment when
Probably,
things
you
are
say?
moving so
You're so
global.
polite, Johanna. Probably. You said something that a few minutes ago that prompts this question from me. Something about Obama and the press.
Mm.
So for Republicans like me, and I was a Republican at the time, was a Republican for a long time, from when I was I think a sophomore in college until 2016. But I think most Republicans would have thought that the press generally was in the tank for Obama and his administration, that the press were generally cheerleaders for Obama, almost spokesmen for him, apologists for him. I bet you all in the White House saw it a lot differently.
Very differently.
Didn't you?
Yeah. Very differently.
Yeah.
And it was what I didn't like sometimes is but you do see people's character this way, is there were people within our orbit who would be like, there'd be a tough question and they'd say, that person's an idiot, and it's like, well, no, just figure out the answer and answer their question. There were, it was interesting because I got to know Sean Spicer in the aftermath of the administrations, both of our administrations. And there are journalists that I would say both the Obama administration and Trump administration would say are the thorns in their side. And, there's a desire from a lot of politicians to control who is covering them. And you saw this even with Gavin Newsom's wife recently was kind of lecturing the press on what topics they should be asking her questions on. But
this is America, ma'am.
Yeah, and you're seeing it, I would say, with a lot of people who will say, "Oh, don't ask me that." And I understand. You're always trying to sell something. Like with President Obama, there we were always trying to, work on, maybe today we're working on energy security and the next day we're working on healthcare security, and so we wanted to stick to the topic. But journalists don't operate that way. They're supposed to be representing the people and the issues that people are having and asking those questions. I think the biggest disconnect sometimes happens when they feel like journalists are out of touch with what people want. And there are, there's reasons that they would think that, right? Like, there are journalists who are asking questions that you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I was just on the campaign trail. I remember this is the story where we were in Iowa and President Obama had said something about the cost of arugula at Whole Foods. And all the journalists, it was like groupthink. And especially with the early age of social media, they were all like, oh my God, he just made a major gaffe. There isn't a Whole Foods in Iowa, which is true, but like we had arugula. The cost of arugula was going up. And in fact, who grows arugula? They grow arugula in Iowa.
Johanna Maska, I will see your arugula and raise you, because Michael Dukakis in the 1988 campaign talked about Belgian endive.
Oh, God.
And Republicans mocked him for this. It was supposed to show him as an elitist and out of touch. A fellow ate Belgian endive. And I don't know how this came up, but by the way, I saw the Duke. Did you see this photo the other day? Age 92. He's in a wheelchair.
Oh,
but he appeared in a group of Massachusetts governors for the 20th anniversary of Romney Care.
Wow.
Mitt was there, and all the living Massachusetts ex-governors, and there was the Duke, Michael Dukakis, in a wheelchair right in the center, looking like himself. So a little walk down memory
How
lane.
interesting. Well, and the fact that there were Republicans celebrating Romney Care, because that is kind of the basis of which we used for Obamacare. But
well, there was Mitt celebrating it, or at least marking it. I don't think what does Republican even mean anymore.
Yeah.
I there's a word I like very much that was coined by Blago, who's the ex-governor of one of the ex-governors. Yeah, exactly. So Blago, I'll call him. He by the way, there's one thing about him I found so charming.
If anyone on the stream, by the way, does not know Governor Blagojevich, they should look him up, because he got in a lot of trouble, rightfully so.
Well, he tried to sell an open Senate seat, Obama's, and it was quite blatant about it. But I was endeared to him because he cares very much about his hair. He has
so
or had
a
beautiful helmet of hair, and I think there was an aide in charge of his comb, and the governor jokingly referred to it as the football, like the nuclear football with the president. So that was good. So Trump, of course, in his first term, so Blago was a Trump fan, I guess, and Blago was in prison, and Trump, of course, sprang him. Of course.
Yeah.
And so the former governor said something like, if you want to know what my politics are, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm a Trumpublican, a Trumpocrat. He said Trumpocrat. And there are a great many, I would say, perhaps tens of millions of people in our country who are Trumpocrats, and interesting coinage.
I of course, Blagojevich, I don't have a big part of my heart that is willing to overlook his massive issues for his hair.
Deep corruption. But isn't that par for the course for Illinois governors? I mean, isn't it almost required that they commit crimes and go to jail?
It is, which is why when people are saying,
what is it about the land of Lincoln, Johanna Maska? What are you going to do about this? Run!
It's real.
You're living in the wrong state to run.
I'm in the
Although they may need you as the Democratic nominee in California before too long, the way they're going, Johanna. Let's not forget that.
Can I tell you, the Illinois, when everyone's all tripping over J.B. Pritzker, I'm also going, I don't know. Again, to me, the Pritzkers, they inherited a lot of money. When you own a hotel chain, I mean, Paris Hilton too, like, they have been brought up with a certain, a very different perspective than I have, than I think a lot of the next gen leaders have. I don't think I would be willing to bet that J.B. Pritzker is not going to be the Democratic nominee. In fact, I'd probably be willing to put like a lot down on a list in case people are wondering where their donations should go. I would mark Rahm Emanuel off that list too. I would say, the media loves covering him, but I don't think so.
You don't think Rahm? Why? Because he's too dicey? His past is too checkered?
And just nobody is enthusiastic about Rahm. There's not like a Rahm base. There's not like people being like, I really want Rahm Emanuel to run.
Can I make an extra political remark about Rahm? I noticed this during the Clinton administration when he was an aide. He was quite young. He had extraordinary posture, and he held himself bodily in an interesting way. He was unbelievably graceful, and he was trained as a ballet dancer. and it's odd for someone who became such a down and dirty politico, and famously foul-mouthed.
Well,
he was a bona fide ballet dancer, trained to be a professional. I'm not sure that helps you in Chicago politics.
No, I don't think so. But of course, he's got a famous brother as well, who's had a big influence in Hollywood with Ari Emanuel. And so again, like, you have a lot of people who are just not really connected to the
Johanna.
ordinary American experience.
Well, hang on a second. Well, but doesn't Rahm have a scientist brother? Oh, we can look this up.
I was going to say. I don't know all
Johanna,
of the family
about
members.
Wealth and politics, but look,
yes,
who is the great tribune of the poor in your party, Johanna Maska? Franklin frickin' Delano Roosevelt was a tribune of the poor. JFK another one of these heirs. And it's so weird that another so-called tribune of the poor in the Republican Party, this champion of the horny-handed sons of toil, is this trust fund baby from New York, Donald J. Trump, who
Who lived in a penthouse.
literally sat on a gold toilet. This is not a
Yes.
metaphor. This is not a joke. He literally, and he is adored by a great many people as a champion of the poor. So politics is weird.
I have wondered for a very long time how people in Galesburg, Illinois thought that Donald Trump represented them. And in fact, like I remember watching Schitt's Creek, which I just love that show.
What
And
did you say, Johanna? This is a family
Schitt's Creek
Substack
is
Live, I believe.
SCHITTS.
I didn't know we were working blue on this program. I would have come with a different repertoire.
It is a hilarious show where there's a very wealthy family that moves to, podunk town like I grew up in. And, it's an interesting situation. And I always thought, if Donald Trump was dropped in Galesburg, Illinois with no money, I cannot imagine, him working at Pizza Hut or him doing any of these jobs without, a certain level of arrogance and inability to get along that you need. And so, that has been interesting. But I think, I come from the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party, of course, doesn't have the same I guess, stopgap measures to a hijacker like Donald Trump. Donald Trump hijacked, I would say, their nomination process. The Democrats have a little bit more with superdelegates. That, of course, have changed with Bernie and some of those changes that he's made, but stopgap measures to make sure that someone will represent the party and has the party support. I think there are people with big ideas in our party. I saw, of course, Mamdani get elected in New York. I think he's very specific to New York, but I think he has big ideas. And I think, those ideas, are being realized. In some cases, we'll see whether they're successful or not, or whether they could be, translated somewhere else. Ro Khanna, of course, is someone I'm watching very closely. He's a congressman from California. He, of course, was involved in working with Republicans to force the disclosure of the Epstein files, take it to the floor vote. Ro Khanna has actually been to Galesburg, Illinois. He's talked about Marshall Plan for jobs. He's talked about artificial intelligence regulation. A lot of the issues that I care a lot about. There are people in our party. James Tallarico, obviously was a name nobody knew, and now he's the Senate nominee in Texas, and has gotten a lot of attention talking about faith in a different way.
Do you think a Democrat can win statewide in Texas?
I didn't before. And then the last couple elections, they've had just the, little test bubbles of small special elections. You're seeing such a big change in the Hispanic vote. I think because Donald Trump has not been enforcing immigration and the way people expected. They expected him to throw out the worst of the worst, and instead there's been a lot of harassment of even U.S. citizens. And so you're seeing, a real revolt against President Trump. I think that also the Iran war is not going to help him. And so, I think that a lot of places that were not in play before, Iowa is another state that had gone super conservative. I would not be surprised if Iowa is in play in November. These are things that it's like, as an analyst, I think it also depends on who the Republicans nominate in Texas, because you've got Paxton, who's a Senate candidate who was impeached by his own party, and then you have Cornyn, who is kind of a more traditional Republican. Donald Trump has not endorsed in that race, and he has said he is going to, but he has not, and we're getting closer and closer to that election. So I think it depends on who they elect. I thought Beto was a terrible candidate. I actually, he had run away from a DUI. I had some real questions about him and his character. But I think James Tallarico may be different. I don't know. I don't know enough about him. I haven't met him.
Before we part, should we talk about freedom and what it means to us and all that jazz? And you wrote an introductory post on our blog, and I wrote an introductory post.
We did.
So freedom is a big topic and occupies many books and many papers and hundreds and countless hours of discussion. But maybe you can do a little distilling.
Yeah. And you too. We have very different perspectives that we share. They are unique and to our own. My real feeling is that government isn't the only indicator of our freedom. Our family, our structures, there's all sorts of measurements. And I remember I had just had my son. I was back on traveling around the world, and there was a woman in Jordan who I met, and I was talking to her, and she's like, "I can't believe your husband would allow you to be here." And, for many women around the world, they know that freedom isn't just dictated by governance, although that's a strong governance model that has held women back, but it's also their family structure. And I am very blessed that I grew up in a family where my parents, my conservative father, wanted his daughter to do everything in the world. Have the ability to do anything that she wanted to, even when I told him I was a Democrat.
Did he ever try to dissuade you or just nod and say,
he was not very happy about it. He was, and it's funny because even when I would go home working with President Obama, I would go home for big family gatherings. It's like, you're president. And, the da-da-da-da-da. And so, I'm used to, I guess, a certain level of reluctance with anyone in politics. But what I will say is, despite, political differences or anything, my parents and my structure gave me the freedom to explore who I got to be, which is so incredible. And as a mom, it's what I want for my children. And so I think that, that freedom is as much familial as is governance structure. But I think that, when we talk about freedom, it's important to recognize that there are a lot of barriers to freedom that could be outside of government altogether.
Sure. Well, there are different kinds of freedom. There is an internal freedom or a spiritual freedom. I've interviewed a lot of political prisoners ex-political prisoners in my career, sometimes future political prisoners. I've interviewed 2 or 3 current ones, even, and they often speak of a certain mental freedom they have. They feel free in conscience, that sort of thing. So there's a spiritual freedom and then political freedom. Your rights, individual rights, your right to live your life as you see fit, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, to fulfill your potential, to pursue your dreams, this is an old Army recruitment slogan, to be all you can be. And so I often press this classical liberal point of view embodied in our founding about what freedom is. And I love the old expression, this is just an old homely thing, but about a democracy. Democracy means the freedom to stretch out your arm as far as you possibly can until it grazes someone else's cheek. And a lot of people on the right, of course, I got this from the left for many years, but in the last 10 years or so, I got it from the right, said, your philosophy, your Americanism, your classical liberalism, your Reagan conservatism, it's a bunch of bunk, or at least it's deeply flawed because there's too much individualism, radical individualism. There's not enough community. There's not enough solidarity. And so you and your type have sparked an epidemic of loneliness. Everything is atomized. We bowl alone. You're antisocial. You stink. And here's my short reply to that. They're long books on the subject, but in this atmosphere of ordered liberty we're talking about, this Tocquevillian democracy, if you like, truth, justice, and the American way, people have endless opportunities to form and to join voluntary associations, to build communities, little platoons and bigger platoons as far as the eye can see. Bush 41 used to say 1,000 points of light. We're talking about a rich civil society, a tapestry. And in this atmosphere of ordered liberty, you don't have to be alone for 1 second if you don't want to be. You don't have to bowl alone. You can join 20 different leagues if you have the time. But here's the rub. You have to let other people alone. You have to let them live their own lives, even as you're living your own life. And it's amazing how few people are willing to do that. I say that in this free society, this open society, as Karl Popper said, that I favor, you can live as socially and as collectively as you want. You can join a commune, live in a teepee with 50 of your closest friends. It's none of my business as long as you're not hurting anyone else.
And
but
yet,
you can't force other people to conform. And a lot of people have trouble with that.
It's interesting, Jay, you bring this up because my mom and I were talking about freedom beforehand. She's out here because I am going to have a baby soon. So she's, my stopgap measure here.
She's super grandma.
Yeah. She is. She's super grandma. But we were talking about my grandmother was a war bride from England, and she grew up, under rations, and she was trying to explain to my son how, they had rations for sugar and they had rations and for even when she got her wedding dress, for cloth and for all of these things. And so that was, World War II, a major fight for freedom. And there were regulations, on people so that there would be enough. And I was thinking about that when we were even talking about, Zoran Mandani just put about a tax on people who have homes that they don't live in that are, upwards of, millions of dollars in New York. And I thought, I wonder who, of those $500 million dwellers would share their sugar. And when push comes to shove,
a lot of these people are very philanthropic. A lot of these people are very charitable. We're a very giving society. And I must say, I thought that video from the mayor was quite bad. And he stood outside someone's apartment. And I thought it was demagogic. I think in our society, if you're a leader, you don't single out private citizens. You don't make a demon out. You don't boogyize them. You don't stand and say, look at this Richie Rich. Look at this bad guy. It just strikes me as rather un-American, frankly.
And yet there's a reason that populism exists right now in America, because so many people are struggling so much just to have basic necessities. And I think that's the imbalance right now, and trying to figure out a way you preserve freedom and opportunity for the next generation, but you actually give freedom and opportunity to the next generation. It's the age-old question.
Do people have too little because others have too much? And I say no.
And I would say there is this abundance philosophy, but to some extent, like what we've seen is, very short-sighted decisions of businesses to pull their manufacturing base out of America to make us more vulnerable, to put us in a situation where we don't have jobs, to give our jobs away to technology that's ripping intellectual property. There isn't a structure right now that will set people up for the freedom that they deserve. And so when you don't have economic security, I don't think your first priority is necessarily democracy. It's rather economic security so that you have a chance to just have your bare necessities. And so...
Would you agree with me, Johanna, that it would behoove the Democratic administration here in New York, where I live, not to drive rich people out of the city? Because the city would be SOL. They pay a lot in taxes.
I would say that...
And they're part of the dynamism of the city.
to whom much is given, much is expected. And when I make more money because I'm more successful, I want to be able to give back. And there is a difference of opinion. And I know, traditional Republicans who have been churches and charities first, and they believe that that can solve for our social ills. But there are, and I am happy to review how we are spending our money in our schools and what we are spending money on. But there are real issues right now with our education, with our opportunities, with those gaps. And I think that government has to be part of the solution. I think, again, if we go back to like core of democracy, we have to have an educated and informed citizenry.
Sure.
And right now, we're not teaching civics enough. We're cutting teachers. We're
Well,
we're
here is where we ally.
problematic.
Here's where we ally. As I said earlier in the, what do we call it? Program live.
Our lovely
I've
Substack Live.
I have very, very strong views on policy, and most of them are Reaganite. But above all, I love this system of ours, our liberal democracy, and I want to see it continue. So we are comrades.
We are.
And
we are.
I love policy debates, but they take place in a secure democracy.
Yeah.
If the ship is leaky, plug the leaks, and then talk about what kind of food you're going to serve aboard.
We got a lot of leaks to fill, and it's only the beginning of year 2 of this this administration. And I know, one thing I'm very conscious of because I have people I love who support President Trump.
Same.
I actually think some of these problems are way bigger than just him. And I don't blame him for all of our problems at all. I would say, with freedom, there are some real questions, and there were a lot of people who were scared during the Biden administration that they didn't feel like they had the freedoms that they wanted. And there are a lot of people right now in the Trump administration who are scared that they don't have the freedoms that they want. And so, really analyzing that, figuring out what policies are, coming forward. There's a lot that needs to be done with reliable narrators. And I'm really grateful, Jay, that you are such a reliable narrator with so much experience and part of the Freedom Center with me here at the University of Arizona.
Thank you. It's just it's quite an honor to be with you and to be with the Freedom Center.
Likewise. Well, thank you.
Maska for governor of either state. I don't care which one.
I don't know. I just gotta get a ticket to any event for any gubernatorial candidate. And if I can't get one in California, we got real problems.
You have duties coming up.
Yeah, that's
maternal
true.
And parental duties that are a lot more important than gubernatorial duties.
Oh, they're in tandem. Thank you so much, Jay, for being, such an awesome colleague here and for this fun opportunity to do our first Substack Live. Hopefully there will be many more. I know I will be back for sure in the fall with a regular cadence.
Good. See you later.
Look forward to it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.